Hello, everyone. Now, I know that it's hard to keep up on top of what's going on in the Holy Land, but if you want to know more about what's happening here in Israel, I'm Aaron Porras, and this is the Weekly Review. Starting early Tuesday morning, 2 rockets fired at northern Israel from Lebanon, and the pair setting off warning sirens in the western Galilee region. Breaking from expectations, however, the Israeli military believing that this was not the work of Iranian proxy terror group Hezbollah. Rather, experts are pointing to a Palestinian group in southern Lebanon, which is also alleged to have fired a dozen rockets into Israel in May during Israel's Operation Guardian of the Walls. Also, thankfully, Israel's Iron Dome defense system intercepting one of the rockets while allowing the second to strike an open area near the coast. Israel reporting no injuries or damages. The IDF also responding to the attack with tank shellings towards the estimated launch site in the Wadi Harmul Valley. Meanwhile, late on Monday night, Syrian state media similarly accusing Israel of launching a number of missiles towards the city of Aleppo, though the target was not yet clear, and no injuries have been reported. The IDF, for its part, isn't commenting on the alleged attack either, as per policy. Action reported Thursday morning along Israel's northern borders for the second day this week, and again, both from Lebanon and Syria. First, a little after 1 in the morning, Syrian state news reporting that an alleged Israeli missile strike had been intercepted. Syrian air defenses activating over the Qusair region of the Homs province, and the targets reportedly Hezbollah military positions and weapons depots. But several missiles were shot down, preventing casualties and keeping damages to a minimum. This as opposed to the previous strikes attributed to Israel on Monday, in which 5 pro-Iran fighters, a military base, and a weapons depot in Aleppo were destroyed. Then the second incident Thursday morning occurring just about an hour later, IDF forces launching a 12-hour manhunt and eventually arresting 2 Lebanese men who had crossed the border into Israel. The suspects, however, were reportedly ruled out as potential terrorists. Rather, security forces believe the pair to be financially motivated, breaking across the blue line in search of work as Lebanon's dire economic and political crises worsen. Lebanon's government has been enduring years of instability, and the value of Lebanon's currency has fallen over 90% in just 2 years. Moving on, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett appearing to backpedal statements from Sunday, seemingly in support of Jewish prayer on the Temple Mount. This after clashes erupting on the Mount over reports of illegal acts of Jewish worship at Judaism's holiest site on earth. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett today clarifying that he only meant to codify freedom of visitation to the Temple Mount during comments made earlier this week. Bennett apparently misspeaking on Sunday when saying that both Jews and Muslims will have their freedom of worship protected on the Temple Mount, the site of the first and second Jewish temples, the holiest place in Judaism, and the site of the Al-Aqsa mosque complex, believed to be the third holiest site in Islam. And aside from hinting at the overturning of a decades-held status quo, Bennett's comments especially sparking outrage as they came on the Tisha B'Av holiday, where hundreds of Jewish pilgrims ascended to the Mount, some of whom were seen praying or even singing Israel's national anthem. Non-Muslims regularly visit in pre-scheduled and organized tours, especially Jews on Tisha B'Av, as it's the anniversary of the destruction of both the first and second temples that were built there. But while all religions are allowed to visit in small groups, under an agreement with the Islamic Waqf which manages the site, only Muslims are allowed to pray there. It's no surprise then that Palestinian and Islamic Waqf officials are calling the Jews' visit an extremist provocation. Even the Islamist Ram party within the coalition is claiming that, quote, the Al-Aqsa mosque in its 35 acres is solely the property of Muslims and no one else, end quote. The party adding that Jewish presence on the Mount could provoke further violence like that seen in May between Israel and Hamas. It's unclear, however, what particular reason led Bennett to walk back his statements. The right to Jewish prayer atop the Mount is hotly debated even among Jewish and rabbinic scholars, some of whom argue that prayer should be forbidden until the third Temple of Legend is erected. Meantime, Israel's President Herzog and Foreign Minister Yair Lapid condemning the baseless hatred and divisions between Jews following the forceful disruption of prayers at an egalitarian section by the Kotel, or the Western Wall, on Sunday. Lapid, for one, claiming in a tweet that the Western Wall belongs to every stream of Judaism and will be a place where every Jew feels at home. In an act of brazen disrespect, a cohort of far-right Orthodox Jews, mostly teenagers, charging into an area by the Western Wall Saturday night that has been set aside for pluralistic prayer. The extremists then cursing and screaming at egalitarian worshipers who gathered there for a conservative prayer service, even installing a partition to segregate the area by gender. Footage from the scene showing conservative leaders pleading with the youths to respect the sanctity of the site and the day, but to no avail. Then, making things worse, the violent disruption taking place on one of the Jews' holiest day, Tisha B'Av, a holiday which Jewish tradition ironically teaches us that the ancient temples were destroyed due in part to senseless hatred between Jews. Meanwhile, the Haaretz Daily reporting that these activists are members of a far-right organization named Liba, which has been organizing daily events at the site, all in efforts to trample plans by the new government to implement a year's frozen deal that would see the pluralistic plaza permanently established. Moving on, in honor of Eid al-Adha, the three-day Muslim holiday celebrating Abraham's sacrificing of the lamb, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz calling Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas to wish him a happy holiday and to discuss the improving of Israeli-Palestinian relations. Hannah Rifkin with the story.
A historic phone call described as having a, quote, positive atmosphere. Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz holding the first conversation in over 4 years between a high-ranking Israeli minister and the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. The last such conversation taking place in 2017 between Abbas and former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Gantz calling particularly to wish a happy holiday to the PA president ahead of Eid al-Adha. Likewise, President Isaac Herzog placing a similar call to Abbas, conveying his own blessings and well wishes ahead of the festival. The two had last spoken weeks earlier when Abbas had called Herzog to congratulate him on his newly elected presidency. The leaders apparently expressing interest to maintain regular contact between one another going into the future. Then at Israel's weekly cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett extending his good wishes to all Muslims in Israel and the region.
אזרחי ישראל המוסלמים והדרוזים, בשם ממשלת ישראל, אני מבקש לברך אתכם לרגל חג הקורבן, עיד אל-אדחא, שיחול מחר. אני מבקש בשם ממשלת ישראל לאחל חג שמח גם לאזרחי מדינות האזור, שכנינו, ובראשן מצרים, ירדן, האמירויות שפתחו בשבוע שעבר את השגרירות בישראל, בחריין שתשלח בקרוב שגריר לארץ, מרוקו וסודאן. אני מאחל לכולם חג שמח.
Now turning to the Muslim tradition, some 100,000 Muslim worshippers, including many from the West Bank, seen praying at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount on Tuesday morning. The massive crowds arriving to celebrate the holiday of Eid al-Adha with face painting, prayers, parades, and charitable acts. And the atmosphere especially electric as the 4-day festivities in 2020 were largely scaled down because of coronavirus. Then worshippers later expected to hit the streets of the nearby markets to buy gifts, sweets, and more. Of course, some were using the occasion to incite as well. A large banner was seen hung outside the Al-Aqsa Mosque in support of Hamas, and the crowd at one point was chanting, quote, "We shall sacrifice our lives for Al-Aqsa." The Temple Mount complex and the mosque that sits atop it have been a long-disputed flashpoint location, often used as a reason to jumpstart conflicts. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid traveling to Morocco next month to inaugurate the new Israeli diplomatic mission in the capital of Rabat. And Lapid will be the first Israeli minister to visit Morocco since the two nations re-established diplomatic ties in part of a three-way deal with the United States last December. Though while sources say that Lapid is hoping to turn the mission in Rabat into a fully fledged embassy, for now, this isn't the case. In December, Morocco stopped short of completely normalizing relations, preferring instead to mutually open diplomatic liaison offices. Meanwhile, newly sworn-in Israeli President Isaac Herzog holding a meeting this week with Morocco's Foreign Affairs Minister Nasser Bourita, the two discussing various political challenges and ways that the two countries can continue developing ties between themselves and the other Gulf Arab states. All right, now in light of the pandemic's continuing spread, new coronavirus regulations are coming out daily along with heavily weighted warnings begging for compliance from the public. But too many, it seems, are ignoring the calls.
מגפת הדלתא ממשיכה להתפשט במהירות ברחבי העולם. זאת מוטציה מדבקת הרבה יותר מקודמותיה. העולם הולך ונצבע אדום.
Prime Minister Naftali Bennett again warning the public to get on board with new restrictions or else face dire consequences, both personally for violating new rules and publicly with respect to the health of the nation. Also, with the exception of a strong advisory to avoid international travel, Bennett is stressing that for the sake of protecting one another, the new rules are, quote, requirements, not recommendations, end quote. The rules are including limiting arrivals to events, weddings, bar mitzvahs, etc., to vaccinated individuals or to those who've recovered from the virus or have a recent negative test. The Revelry Pass, a new take on the Green Pass, likewise coming into effect. And then abiding by relevant quarantines and wearing masks indoors or in large crowds also stressed as a must. Bennett continuing that the goal is remaining to return to as close to normal as soon as possible, including with tourism and the coming school semester, especially after a full year of, quote, millions of pupils fading in front of Zoom at home, end quote.
אנחנו עכשיו נערכים מראש עם תוכנית סדורה לתקופה הקרובה עד לשנת הלימודים. בזמן הקרוב אנחנו נודיע על הכל באופן מסודר, בלי הנחתות של הדקה ה-90, כדי שיהיה לכולם זמן לתכנן ולהערך. המטרה המרכזית שלנו, לפתוח את שנת הלימודים בצורה חלקה.
The repeated pleas for compliance, however, still appearing to fall on deaf ears. Over 37,000 passengers passing through Ben Gurion International Airport on Monday alone, nearly double the number from the day before. Likewise, buses and trains overcrowding with people who are ignoring the mask mandate, leading many passengers to complain about the lack of potentially life-saving enforcement. In any case, despite authorities' best wishes, if adherence continues to flounder and infections continue to rise, new lockdowns in Israel may be on the horizon. In related news, newly rising star deaf Knesset member Shirley Pinto from the Yamina Party earning her first stripes in government this week. The career advocate for accessibility in Israel and Health Minister Nitzan Horowitz together announcing the introduction of transparent masks for hospital staff. And this just 1 week after Pinto delivering a blistering speech to Knesset on all of the accessibility shortfalls across the country, particularly with respect to healthcare. At any rate, hospitals and clinics in Israel will now soon be required to stock clear-faced masks so that staff and medical experts can abide by COVID regulations while better communicating with hearing-impaired patients who rely on lip reading.
קודם כל אני רוצה להודות לו ולך על האישור, באמת תוך 3 ימים הוא אישר את המסכות השקופות בשימוש בבתי חולים. לפניו נאבקנו על זה מאוד מאוד קשה מול שר הבריאות הקודם. זה דבר מאוד פשוט והוא אישר את זה כל כך מהר על התקן האמריקאי. יש לנו את המסכה הזאת, מסכה שקופה, מסכה רפואית שנותנת שירות בבתי חולים וקופות חולים. אני רוצה להודות לך באמת על האישור הזריז בשם כל קהילת החירשים וכבדי שמיעה. תודה ענקית לך.
The directive is set to take effect August 1st. Now, it seems that former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not quite used to his new role as the leader of the Knesset opposition. Netanyahu, apparently the government's backseat driver now, attempting to continue managing the coalition's coronavirus policy, but with neither the permission nor the authority to do so. Knesset opposition leader, Likud chief, and former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly speaking multiple times to the CEOs of Pfizer and Moderna in recent days. The conversations focusing on securing and promoting a third dose of the COVID vaccines for Israelis. Netanyahu discussing his dialogues in a Twitter video on Wednesday, saying that every day without such a booster shot is a hazard to Israeli citizens, particularly those over age 50.
זאת הדרך היחידה להגן על האוכלוסייה. הדרך היחידה לשמר את ההצלחה הגדולה שהשגנו בהוצאת ישראל ראשונה בעולם מהקורונה.
Netanyahu neglected, however, to notify Prime Minister Bennett or any other members of the coalition, neither before nor after these phone calls. And Health Minister Horowitz is repeating claims that Israel has more than enough vaccines in stock. Political analysts then arguing that Netanyahu is likely just trying to subvert the government and assert authority as he's publicly sworn he would do. Meantime, the government also advancing a number of new COVID initiatives, including the reintroduction of the so-called Green Pass system. And most excitingly, the start of the clinical testing with Oravax by Oramed Pharmaceuticals. Oravax is a pill-form coronavirus vaccine now approved for trial at Tel Aviv's Sourasky Medical Center, and Israel will become the first country in the world to test an oral COVID vaccine, which, if successful, could eliminate the need for temperature-controlled transport and enable the world's most remote and vulnerable peoples to get vaxxed. Moving on, for years, both public and private initiatives have been hard at work at trying to bring developments to the areas of Israel's periphery. But basic infrastructure has long been lagging behind the demand, at least until now. A historic announcement on Tuesday from Ma'alot, the northern Israeli town now becoming the latest in the periphery to receive lightning-fast connectivity via fiber optic cables. And far from the only one to benefit, over 1 million periphery households already updated, and with 60,000 more connected each month. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Communications Minister Yoaz Hendel expressing the importance behind this achievement, calling this a connection not just of cables, but of Zionist values, and on the same level as extending water or electricity services.
בעצם מה שאנחנו עושים, אנחנו מחברים עיר אחרי עיר לסיבים אופטיים עד הבית, כדי שהאינטרנט יהיה סופר מהר, יהיה אפשר לעבוד מהבית באיכות הכי גבוהה, כאילו אתם יושבים בעיר ניו יורק. המשמעות היא דרמטית.
Meanwhile, speaking as a former high-tech CEO, Bennett adding that aside from benefiting Israel by reducing highway congestion or air pollution, the initiative will also draw a new opportunity away from the crowded center regions.
המשמעות היא אדירה. זה אומר באמת שילד במעלות יוכל לזכות באותה רמת שירות וחינוך אונליין של ילד במרכז. זה אומר שבאמת אפשר להקים פה חממות סטארט-אפ וסטארט-אפים שיכולים לעבוד בזמן אמת. זה אומר שרופא יכול לשבת במעלות ולנהג ציוד מרחוק בבית חולים בדטרויט.
All right, our final topic tonight coming straight from above, literally. 12 Israeli daredevils accomplishing an exhilarating feat, soaring way past the country's previous skydiving record for 10 linked people. Video of the dive showing the parachutists forming a head-down pre-approved structure while plummeting at over 275 kilometers per hour or over 170 miles per hour, and setting a new precedent for aspiring Israeli athletes in the process. Now, according to judges, the structure is complete when each participant reaches their exact predetermined position and a full connection can be seen with the right hand. Of course, Israelis involved in the world record as well. In fact, Sharon Hernoi, coach of the Israeli skydiving squad, was one of the 164 participants who broke the world record for the number of linked divers in Chicago in 2015. And Arik Kaplan, president of the Eilat Association, which organizes many non-Olympic athletics, notes that Israel is eager to remain at the forefront of the sport. Now for our final story tonight, Israeli filmmaker Nadav Lapid winning big at the Cannes Film Festival in France. Lapid earning the jury prize, another runner-up for Best Movie, for his semi-autobiographical film Ahezni, which takes a critical look at the supposed limits to artistic freedoms in Israel. More specifically, the Livewire film represents the director's professional, personal, and political conflicts with his own Israeli identity. The plot following a filmmaker who is struggling to come to terms with his mother's fast-approaching death, while also dealing with the hostility of government officials.
מה שתראו הכל היה באמת. כל המאורעות קרו, רק שימו לב לסגנון.
Meanwhile, Lapid's short film Star, also screening at Cannes, though it was not set to compete. All right, our final topic tonight, as supporters of Israel continuing to face off against anti-Israel delegitimization campaigns on college campuses across the U.S., a group of 40 student leaders beyond the Jewish faith have arrived in Israel as part of the Jewish National Fund USA's Caravan for Democracy student leadership mission to Israel. The unique mission allowing student leaders to explore Israel's diverse melting pot of peoples, as well as the issues that matter them most, and through meetings with political, cultural, and community leaders from all different backgrounds and faiths. Joining us in the studio to share their experiences from this year's JNF USA Caravan for Democracy Student Leadership Mission are Lexi Deutsch from Regis University in Colorado and Miguel Acosta Loza from Gonzaga University in Washington State. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So first of all, I'm very excited to have you here and to hear about your experiences in Israel. So that is my first question. What is your first impression, really, since landing in Israel, and how do they compare to maybe some of the preconceptions that you had? Miguel, if you want to start.
I think Israel is a rainbow nation. Like, that's the first impression that I ever had. It's amazing. My mother tongue is Spanish, and I thought that I would never get to use it here. I talked to a Mexican Jew a few days ago. I talked to another person from Egypt who happens to speak Spanish too. So I mean, it's just a diversity. And this is well beyond a melting pot. This is, every person can be their own person.
Interesting.
I think that's one of the things that's impressed me as well, is just how diverse and how just lively everything is here. I had maybe heard some not great conceptions when I was home, especially lately in the news, but that's not at all what I've seen here. Everyone's happy and thriving, and it's really, truly beautiful here.
Would you say that you've seen like a side of Israel that perhaps is not shown in your news? Like something that was really just totally new to you?
Daily life.
Really?
As simple as that, daily life. I took a class on the Arab-Israeli conflict, and never we got into food, we never got into culture, we never got into what does a daily Israeli life look like. Yeah. And this is what we're getting to see now. It's amazing.
Wow.
I agree with that. Even today, just going to a small restaurant here that's, family restaurant where their family came here from the 1880s and has just lived there. Or a couple days ago, we got to go to a pool in a kibbutz and just getting to dance with 8- and 9-year-olds and just kind of have the daily life piece that you don't see very often.
All right, so I've got dancing with 8- and 9-year-olds, and I've got going to restaurants. Hit me with some more highlights of this trip. Go ahead, Lexi.
I am someone who comes from the Christian faith, so I think seeing the Christian holy sites has been something that I've really cherished, just getting to come and deepen my faith here in that way and be in the places I've read about in scriptures has been really special for me.
Yeah, learning more about accessibility in Israel, sustainability. It's amazing and how the technology world has evolved so much in this part of the world.
Mm-hmm. So what do you hope to come away with from this visit most? I should ask.
A story. That's what I want to come off of. From here, it's a story and being able to tell my own experience. Of course, we came with JNF, but we are not told what to think. We are here to make and come to our own conclusions.
All right. Yeah.
I think, again, a very similar answer of just being able to go home and go back to our campuses and our friends, and when we hear things on the news, be, well, maybe that's not what I saw, and just kind of appreciating even the diversity amongst the other students that are here. Everyone asks such great questions. I feel like I don't speak enough because I just keep hearing these questions and get thinking and continue to think about these home and be able to learn as much as I can from the people here and the cultures here.
All right, well, first of all, just on a personal note, as we mentioned earlier, I know how much pressure there is, honestly, and so I want to applaud you both just for coming and exposing yourself, seriously, because not everybody is willing to open themselves to that experience. And so thank you both so much for coming in, and thank you for coming to the studio.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
And that's it for ILTV's Weekly Review. I'm Aaron Porras. See you next week.